Now, I know a lot of you think I've beaten this topic to death over the last year and a half, which is fair enough to say. But Rian Johnson has once again said something that's left me scratching my head and makes it clear he still doesn't understand or refuses to believe why a lot of fans simply do not like The Last Jedi. So what I want to do here is lay out the reasons why it rubs me the wrong way when he says things like this in an interview. I think the instant you start thinking in terms of how do you not step outside of the bounds of what the original movies did, you're not thinking the way the people who made the original movies did. They were with every movie, they were pushing it forward. With every movie they were stepping outside those bounds and pushing the characters into new, emotionally honest but surprising places. That's why those movies are great. That's why they're alive. If they had been looking at something that came before it and saying, oh, we better not do this because that is outside of this or that, it would have been different. Okay, so first of all, I get what he's trying to say here, that you have to constantly try new and different things, that you shouldn't limit where you take the story based on where it's been before, and I don't disagree at all. In fact, I've said repeatedly that one of the biggest problems with the sequel trilogy is it feels too much like the original trilogy, that we once again have Empire vs. Rebellion, only now it's the First Order vs. Resistance, and that one lone hero seeking to become a Jedi is supposed to save us all, with it now being Rey instead of Luke. However, the way Johnson goes about saying all this makes no sense, because you're either staying true to the story and characters, staying within those boundaries that are already there and established by the previous films who were doing something original, or you're trying something new and different with it all too, with the story and characters I mean. Because saying that pushing the characters in an honest, emotional direction is also stepping outside the bounds of the story and taking it to surprising places is contradictory and makes my head hurt to even think about. Because in the case of Luke in The Last Jedi, you, Rian Johnson, either have to fully believe that that's the way Luke was supposed to be in that movie, that it's the truest representation or progression of the character you could imagine, which would make it not a surprise then, right? Or making him that way was thinking outside the box and was supposed to be a surprise and different from what we should have expected. You can't have it both ways here. You can't say you both surprised us and stayed true to the character at the same time. So either you went against what you expected him to be or you didn't. And since you've said in the past that you honestly believe that's the way Luke would have ended up, how are you trying to claim you took a risk with the story if you just followed what you honestly thought would happen next? Because I don't see it that way at all. I don't see you taking risks with the actual story, only with one of its characters that many people wanted to be a certain way. I see that the biggest and virtually only risk you took here was one outside of the actual story. In fact, you seemed more concerned with pushing a message about failure being a teacher and how hero worship is bad for us in the real world, more so than focusing on any lesson learned by the characters in the film, especially any learned by our new main character, Rey. Because let's be real here. This movie was more about shocking longtime fans of Luke with the way he was, those of us who feel like we've known him for years, maybe even our whole lives, rather than shocking Rey with the way he was, someone who thought he was just a myth until a couple days ago. Furthermore, you haven't taken the story itself outside of any of its pre-established bounds. You've done nothing all that original with the story itself, nor did you basically add anything new to the lore, despite the fact that the previous movie set you up to do just that. The Force Awakens left the door wide open to do an incredible amount of world building and digging into the lore of the Star Wars galaxy, but you tackled none of it. Who or what is Snoke? You didn't answer that question, and you ridiculed those who tried to, and it was a question that could have taken the story in an actual new direction if he was something radically different from the Sith, something with a different agenda than Palpatine's "I want to rule the galaxy for the sake of ruling the galaxy." Instead, you killed him off and pushed Kylo Ren as the one true bad guy of the trilogy, even though, as I predicted in previous videos, that wasn't going to work for Episode 9 after Rey had already been seen to easily defeat Kylo Ren, so another larger and more credible threat was going to have to be introduced or brought back in Episode 9, which is happening with Palpatine. Then you made Rey a nobody, which could work if a good explanation for her is given, but instead you explained her away and her powers in just one line about darkness rising and light to meet it, as if that should just answer everything we've ever wanted to know about what she has done and what we will see her do in the future. We should just accept that long durations of training are no longer going to be required and that the dark side should not be feared as much because the Force has the ability to just power level someone out of the blue to take it down a peg. that Yoda was speaking nonsense when he said the quick and easy path was the path of the dark side, because that's now apparently the path of the light, getting things without having to earn them and practicing at them. Great lesson for the kids, that one is. Glad to see the crazy notion of hard work and discipline being essential to the Jedi way was done away with all in one swift stroke. Then there's the Knights of Ren, which Rian Johnson said he didn't have a place for in his movie, which is great and all, but the last movie kind of implied they might end up being something important or relevant, and don't even get me started on Maz Kanata. An interesting character from The Force Awakens was reduced to one rather awkward scene about what her and the Master Codebreaker had once been up to. Sure, it was kind of cute when she referred to Chewie as her boyfriend in The Force Awakens, but the stuff about the Codebreaker in The Last Jedi was just off-putting. So again here, outside of darkness rises and light to meet it, a line that contradicts previous lore, and Force Ghosts being able to call down lightning, which also contradicts previous lore, what did Rian Johnson add to the lore of Star Wars? Where was his thinking outside the box in all of this? All those big mysteries with The Force Awakens, all those chances to take some sort of really big risk with the actual story, to take this franchise into a truly new direction, but no, let's just make Luke a crabby old man who gives up. That's the risk he goes with, because when we break everything else down into the simplest of components, The Last Jedi looks a hell of a lot like The Empire Strikes Back. Because here again we have a large battle in the first act of the film that devastates the good guys' forces and sends our heroes off on the run in different directions. One group of them is being relentlessly chased by the bad guys, while another hero goes off in search of a Jedi Master for training, though yes, technically, Rey goes in search of Luke before the battle in The Last Jedi. The group of good guys that was being chased then ends up being betrayed at some point by someone, which then leads to them being captured or trapped. Furthermore, at one point, our hero who initially sought out Jedi training decides to go and try to save someone or someones, but will ultimately fail to achieve this. However, where Luke in The Empire Strikes Back needed saving after his bad decision to go rescue his friends, Rey in The Last Jedi ends up being the one to save her friends after the bad decision to try and bring Ben Solo back to the light side. And she was able to do this to save her friends, mainly because Luke Skywalker had realized how badly he'd messed up and had given his life to be a sort of distraction. Which then leads us to the biggest and pretty much only major difference between the storylines in these two films. In The Empire Strikes Back, Luke is the one who fails. He fails his masters Obi-Wan and Yoda, and he goes to save his friends despite the fact that he is being trained and knows it's a trap, and that deep down, he knows becoming a Jedi is more important than the life of his friends. They, his masters, then let him suffer the consequences of that bad decision because the burden of Luke's fate or his failure is not theirs to bear. They did what they could for him. In The Last Jedi, however, it's Rey's master, Luke, that is the one who fails her. She goes off to save Ben in spite of Luke because he has refused to properly train her and is instead trying to convince her not to be a Jedi. After Rey leaves then, Luke then has to force project himself across the galaxy and give his life because he is, at least partially, to blame for the way Rey has acted, for Rey running off to save Ben. He had the chance to convince her to stay by offering to train her the right way and then for them to eventually maybe save Ben together, but he didn't do that and instead lets her go into what he knows is a trap where she's likely going to be killed. So basically all Rian Johnson has done here is take the same idea or story we already got with The Empire Strikes Back and simply shift the blame from the student to the master. This is his way of taking the story or thinking outside of the box. And all of this is why Rey's decision to go and save Ben feels hollow to me and why I can't get into or feel for this character. She's not making a decision against her better judgment. She's not making a poor decision based on feelings or emotions that she can't control or can't help giving into, which is something a future Jedi would have to overcome. She's only doing it because it feels like she has no better option at the moment, not because she flat out is making a huge mistake. So again, this all just feels more like Luke's fault than anything else. It doesn't seem like she's going to Kylo Ren because she really truly cares about him, certainly not the same way Luke cared about his friends, or actually believes or even understands what she said about how bringing him back to the light could shift the balance. Instead, it feels more like her line of thinking here is, well, Luke won't help me, so I can't find my belonging with him, so maybe I can with Ben Solo. Essentially, Luke is pushing her to make the wrong choice and then has to give his life to come and save them all later. which is one of the big reasons why I don't like this movie. I don't like that it does everything it can to skirt around this idea that Rey makes a big, dumb decision, even though she does make a big, dumb decision to go and try to save Ben Solo. I mean, how did she really think this was all going to play out? That she'd turn herself in and Kylo Ren, this guy who had just murdered his father right in front of her a couple days ago, would team up with her and the two would run off and save the galaxy together as Jedi? And side note here, why the hell did Chewbacca go along with this plan? He's the one who drops her off at the Supremacy after all. I mean, did he or did he not shoot Kylo Ren a couple days ago with his bowcaster, obviously intending to kill him? If he likes Rey so much, why would he then deliver her to the guy who had just killed his best friend a couple days ago? How did he think this was all going to play out? Anyway, I'll leave you with this. One of my favorite scenes in all of Star Wars is when Luke Skywalker is dangling below Cloud City after his encounter with Vader, and he's begging Ben for help. But as he was warned, Ben cannot or will not interfere, and Luke is on his own. And if you ever want to see a moment where Luke Skywalker is humanized, it's right here, because he's as good as dead, or should be, and he absolutely knows it. So no, we didn't need to see him humanized as a broken old hermit in The Last Jedi. We'd already seen that. We'd already seen him at his absolute lowest in the previous trilogy, right after he learns he'd been lied to about his father, after he'd failed to save his friends, and after he'd lost a hand and is now about to fall to his death. And you know who saved him in that moment? It was his friends. So how is it a natural progression of the character? How are we being honest emotionally about Luke if he not only bounced back from this moment, but became stronger from it as well? How could this guy one day give up on his friends who had saved him? So let's be brutally honest here. The Last Jedi is not a creative masterpiece. It's a movie that offers nothing new to the Star Wars lore and copies and pastes elements of The Empire Strikes Back, but instead of breaking Rey, our new main character, and putting all the failure on her like it was put on Luke in The Empire Strikes Back to help humanize him, to help us feel his pain and regret so that we could connect with him, it places it elsewhere and fails to truly humanize Rey, which is why a lot of people don't connect with this character. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about Rian Johnson's latest comments. Is it just me, or do they make absolutely no sense, and is he just kind of talking out his ass at this point? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.